They say we should have known better than to fall so deep down into this rabbit hole.
Get
we found.
ready. It's time again to venture down the rabbit hole into the world of cybersecurity. You're plugged into the podcast for security leaders and practitioners with a business sense. Prepare for unique interviews, insights, and practical advice that makes your job just a bit easier. And now, please welcome your guides on this adventure, James Jardine and the White Rabbit, Rafal James.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome down the Security Rabbit Hole to yet another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. I'm Raf, I am your host, and with me as always right there is Mr. James Jardine. How are you, buddy?
Good. How are you doing today, Raf?
It's another day in paradise. The world takes another turn around the sun, and summer's coming to an end. Although you couldn't tell that by that around here. It's in the mid 90s with a daytime index of like 112, which is awesome.
Yes, we're seeing the same thing.
And this has probably been the rainiest summer I can recall down here in the South. I mean, it is just absolutely torrentially pouring. I went kayaking down Chattahoochee the other day, and I remember roughly from memory, right, where the big rocks are you want to avoid in the river and stuff. Like, I saw none of them, and I found them by accident. So I went over the top of them and went, "Oh!" as the bottom of the boat scraped. Yeah, that was awesome. So, all right. Another great episode. Hey, folks, really quick, as you're listening to this, before we kick off too much, I want to say thanks for everybody that's subscribed to our YouTube channel. There's a bunch of views on there. Folks that allow us to record video and post it, we post that up there. We have a LinkedIn page, which kind of is the place to actually open discussion. Obviously, the Twitter feed at DtSR_podcast is where I post all the links and everything to Twitter. And yeah, so there's even a Facebook page for those of you that Facebook. I figured, why the hell not? Everybody else is doing it. Anyway, so without much more ado, thanks for joining us. We have Aki Peritz with us today, and we're going to talk cyber. We're going to talk open source intel. We're going to talk maybe a little bit of NatSec, and let's start with welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, and we'll just go from there.
Sure. I'm a former CIA analyst. Used to work in East Asia, and then thought that was a little less interesting, and so I switched gears and I went to counterterrorism, mostly in Iraq and the greater Middle East. I've worked in a number of private investigation firms after leaving government. And I currently teach at American University. I teach at the School of International Studies, and I teach their graduate school program on intel analysis, some foreign policy, and so forth. And I do a bunch of other things too.
A bunch of other things he would have to kill us if he told us about. See, James, this is how we get a good podcast.
That's a lot of paperwork. So I hate doing paperwork.
I am glad that the thing that stands between me and certain death is paperwork.
I don't know about that, Raf. I mean, before we started recording, he did have a skeleton on his desk. So
that's true. That's true.
He's got to have ways to get around the paperwork.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, I didn't. When you're in the bureaucracy, you actually know how to do paperwork really fast and really well, and so, but still, I hate doing it. So.
Well, interesting. So counterterrorism. Spent time in Asia. So how much of your life is in like the cyber realm or the working on I would say working with not necessarily threats in that manner, but pulling data off of the cyber realm, the Twitters, the internets.
Well, it's funny. It's like cream. Cyber rules everything around me. Everything that we touch, everything that we do in a modern digitized society can in some way be connected to cybersecurity or cyber-related activities.
Right. Fair enough.
What I think about this, and this is something that a lot of people forget, is that cyber, however you want to define it, is just people acting in certain ways using a different tool. In this case, some sort of digital tool to activate the things that they actually want to do or achieve whatever goal they want to do. So I actually, when I was working at the agency, I did a lot of work on propaganda, terrorist propaganda. And so between 2004 and 2006, Al-Qaeda in Iraq would turn out these videos about people being murdered online. They would grab an American or a Brit or a bunch of Iraqis and essentially murder them online, murder them on video, and then post their videos online. And when this happened in 2004, there was a Philadelphia native named Nick Berg who was grabbed and killed, and then his video was placed online. It was a huge deal. And so fast forward now to 2014, 2015, 2016, so now a decade later, we now have we had ISIS murdering people. I think you probably remember that. And all they had to do,
unfortunately,
remember that. All they had to do was film their video and then place it online, and then it went from the digital realm to the I guess in real life realm. So like your grandparents who read newspapers on pieces of paper, they knew about it. Yeah, dead trees. Everybody knew about it. And so basically, even though they were using an internet platform, an internet mechanism to get their message across, they're still achieving the things that they used to do in the pre like huge social media world. So it is when they want to get things on TV, Al-Qaeda in Iraq 15 years ago would contact Al Jazeera. Now all they have to do is put it online, and they have their own distribution channels. What we're seeing about, let's say right now in 2021, is the Taliban have become pretty sophisticated about what they're doing there. They have achieved, as we're talking right now, they have basically taken over most of Afghanistan, most of Kabul, the capital. And they are getting their message across, both traditionally through press conferences and so forth, but also through Telegram, through other places.
Yes, I saw that. They're basically, I mean, they have a Twitter spokesperson. They have a like actual like a marketing campaign to hey, look, this is the nicer, softer, we behead you much more gently side of the town. Like what the hell?
Well, it's interesting. I think at some point we're going to find out that they were working, or somebody was working with them, some sort of PR manager, somebody who actually knows how to utilize this stuff and is getting paid to do this. We're actually going to find out that they have some sort of PR campaign or PR company, probably based in Pakistan, that is actually helping them do this. Because I mean, you just don't drop this out of you don't just come out of the gate as a fighting organization and know how to do this.
Right.
But essentially, they're exploiting our digital means, which is basically the infrastructure that the United States has built to achieve their own political goals. And that's the interesting thing. And so you can look at these smaller state organizations, and the Taliban is not that big, and they're not that well resourced, but they know how to use the things that you and I know how to use: social media, traditional media, leaks to press, all that sort of stuff. They know exactly how to use it. And so we've actually seen this huge democratization of message, for better or for worse. Whether it's the Taliban, whether it's like other terrorist groups, extremist groups, etc. So it's really interesting.
So so this stuff is super interesting because that kind of ties into the whole, it actually ties into like disinformation campaigns and all the other stuff that's going on. I mean, we've got like the internet is a wonderful place because it disseminates information quickly, but it's an awful place because anybody can disseminate information quickly. And whether it's Russian trolls targeting us for, let's not even go into that, or the Chinese or the North Koreans or the Iranians or the Taliban or I don't know, a political party in the U.S. That. It seems like there is this general problem with being able to, how do I put this gently? Tell fact from fiction or fact from propaganda. Like it's really look, when the Nutters were around, even 30 years ago, they struggled. Like they weren't just going to show up on the mainstream news and be like, look, we're being magnetized by a vaccine. Like people would be like, get off the set, like somebody arrest that man. Now they have their own networks. They have YouTube channels, and they've got millions of supporters. They're selling God only knows what, and people are like subscriptions. And I feel like the internet was a wonderful thing, and then it just got this is the other side of that blade that got turned against us, and it's gotten kind of ugly.
Sure. I mean, that's democratization without guardrails, right? So when everybody when everybody shows up and there's no real content moderation, the loudest people show up, and that's why you have to have guardrails, moderation, and so and what this is called is control. You need somebody to control this. And that's something that is anathema to a lot of the libertarian impulses that created the internet, that animate a lot of these tech firms, which I understand, but we're seeing almost a real time. We are living through a political science experiment. What happens when you just allow anybody to talk about anything and disseminate information of varying degrees of quality across platforms to hundreds of millions of people?
Well, so this is an interesting experiment because this experiment isn't replicated in other parts of the world, right? I mean, the U.S. has a monopoly, I think, or do we, on this sort of post anything's you can say anything, do anything, like with some minor limitations, right? Exploitation, that kind of stuff you can't post because they'll come find you, and they'll take you down. But for the most part, conspiracy theories and stuff like that, it's everywhere. And is it like that in other parts of the globe?
Well, it really depends. So, for example, if you don't want to see sort of like neo-Nazi imagery on Twitter, you just sort of set your setting to living in Germany, where they have extremely harsh laws against Nazi propaganda. And so if you say you're based in Germany, it'll automatically filter out a lot of this, a lot of the junk. Obviously, there are ways to get around it, but that's a bit of a cat and mouse kind of effort. If you look at China, China has built over the last generation. They're trying to build their own intranet, and I'm sure that you've had other folks talk about this. And they have a lot of they put a lot of money. The central government puts a lot of money into monitoring and surveillance and integrating all that data into a cohesive whole that in turn the Communist Party can exploit.
Yeah.
But again, it all comes down to people. It takes tens of the Communist Party of China employs tens of thousands of content moderators. They're constantly looking. They cannot automate everything. I mean, they automate a lot of stuff, but you still need people to make decisions. And so, if you want to get around certain barriers, certain words, people come up with code words. So for example, if you don't want to talk about June 4th, which was the anniversary of Tiananmen Square, you say it was May 35th or May 34th or whatever it is.
I got
it. That's one way to do it. I mean, but you can also see this on let's say Facebook here in the United States. I mean, if you come out on Facebook and say like the vaccine is wrong and here are all these bad things about it, and you push out conspiracy theories, Facebook will find you eventually. And so what you do is you talk in code. You don't call it vaccines, you call it a party. And then he's like, you want to be part of a party? Like I talked to somebody about going to a party and he said, don't go to the party. You need a human being to make a determination whether this is actually violates one's terms of service. So again, it all boils down to people, and Facebook doesn't employ enough people, in my view, that they can go after these groups on their platform. But again, it goes back to the libertarian impulses of these organizations, and it also goes back to money. You know, for every security person that Facebook
always
hires, that's a little less money that Facebook HQ can make. I mean, Zuckerberg's not, maybe he doesn't get he can't get the solid gold, faucets. He has to get the gold plated ones. Save some money.
What will he ever do? Look, listen. But we found out, and it became public that even in the last, I don't know, call it last 4 or 5 years, that all the technology that we use, right? Encrypted communications apps, whether it's Signal, it's Telegram, it's the 17 other ones that exist, right? WhatsApp, all these things that terrorist groups use and bad actors use for communicating. And has that limited our intelligence gathering capabilities? Has that, because it's gone effectively, it's gone encrypted, it's gone kind of underground, so the fact that they've moved from open forums in some cases to these encrypted channels, has that limited our ability to process and gather intelligence?
Yes and no. So, for example, the Taliban uses WhatsApp to communicate.
They do realize it's Facebook, right?
They do, but they also know that Facebook doesn't. Facebook talks a big game about end-to-end encryption, and we don't monitor anything, we don't collect anything, blah blah blah. Whether that's true or not, it appears. I mean, if the Taliban feels confident to take over a country using an American company to as their primary means of communication, that suggests to me that maybe what Facebook is selling is actually true.
This sounds like a commercial for Facebook right now. I mean, just like, this is the perfect, like, hey, look, if they'll use it and they trust it, you should trust it too.
You should trust it too. They took over an entire country of like 30, 40 million human beings.
In like 8 days.
Yeah.
Nobody could have seen that coming. Anyway, moving on.
No, oh yeah. So, for example, the Russians wanted Telegram to provide their. They wanted root access. They want it for security reasons.
Sure.
And Telegram said no. This is about 6 years ago. And so they tried to shut down Telegram, and they were unable to do so. And even though senior people like the foreign ministry's spokesperson, they use Telegram to communicate. It's much more popular. Like, most people here in the States don't actually use Telegram to communicate like WhatsApp and Signal and so forth, but it's far more popular in Russia and other places. In terms of ease of use. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. These are just communication devices and communication systems that people or organizations that the United States believes is probably not too pro-American. And so what do? Do you actually step in and try to force or oblige these organizations, these companies, to give up this information? Now, there's like certain ways to do that. Obviously, the FBI can really lean on people, lean on companies. But if the companies themselves say, like, listen, we have no, we created this unbreakable box and we can't actually use it. We can't actually get into the messages. What are you supposed to do if you're the FBI or the CIA or NSA?
I think you hire an Australian firm to break in.
Yes, no. Yes, you get somebody else to do it. And by the way, that actually happens. That happens more than you think. Sometimes police will ask private companies, can you do X? Because we cannot do it. And once you do X and then you write a report, then they'll say, well, this other company just did this. This private company just did this. We can use that information to achieve whatever our goals are. It's a really murky place. And I believe it's actually a good thing here in the United States, because we actually do believe in civil liberties and privacy in the government, in the sense that we will at least pay lip service to it, and we will actually actively try, and you actually can fight this in the courts, versus places like China or Russia, where they don't. I mean, there's no fig leaf. The government controls the systems, it controls the networks. If you go to China today, and you bring your laptop, you have almost 100% assurance that it's going to be compromised at some point. As soon as you plug it in your hotel room, or you log on or someplace. It's extremely difficult to. There's no assumption of privacy or security in a lot of countries.
That can get pretty interesting. I mean, you said we at least pay lip service to it here. I'd say at best. Because I don't know that we actually care that as much as we say we do. And even if we, at the broad level, at the leadership level, we do, the general population is, I feel, at best confused about what privacy means, because they'll say, you can't track me. By the way, here's what I ate, where I'm at, and who I'm with, 7 times a day. Like, okay, maybe you don't quite understand what it is that you're doing, but all right.
Yeah.
So from the your expertise is obviously open source intelligence. Give us a sense of what that means for a day job.
For a day job. Well, so for example, I'm working for a client right now, and they asked me to look at an organization that is doing some nefarious things online and in person. And here in the United States, here in CONUS, we just hemorrhage data on lots of organizations, lots of ourselves, where we live. If you have access to credit reports, you have so much information. This is actually all of the 3 major credit agencies take a lot of all of our data, whether we want to or not, and they repackage it and they resell it to essentially third-party vendors, strangers such as myself. Why should I know everything about you, like how much money you owe in your mortgage, how much you owe in your car, how many cars you own, all the places you've lived, who you, etc. I find this super interesting is that LPRs, or license plate readers. So imagine you're living in a metro area. So let's say Atlanta or New York or DC or LA. They have all these license plate readers all over the metro area. You would think that somebody being able to track your car is the province of law enforcement, which I believe it should be. But tow truck companies actually have the same license plate readers in the back of their tow trucks, and they just drive around and looking for hot cars or cars that need to be towed. What do you do with that data? If you know what you're doing, a stranger, can buy that data if you know who you're talking to. And so you can see how this is actually really good. Let's say you're a private investigator and you want to determine patterns of life. You can do all kinds of things, especially for a nefarious counterparty. But what if you're like a stalker, or you're a person who's got ill intentions? You can figure out where people move, where they go,
where they work, where they go to the pool,
yeah, right?
What time they leave their house, yeah.
And then there have been a number of articles in various publications, New York Times, Wired, etc., that talk about how our phones supposedly have all this anonymized data, and all these data brokers actually control all this data. It's all anonymous, but if you know how to manipulate
thank you for using the air quotes.
Yeah. You can start tracking individual people down. And we as a country have not been really good about regulating this information. Private companies are going to try to make money. That's why, and that's our capitalist system, and that's fine. But that's why you need our government to regulate, or at least try to regulate, these issues. And if you don't do that, if you don't have that sort of happy balance, over-regulation is bad, but also no regulation is bad. And so you have to really come to some sort of balance, especially with an emerging and evolving technologies such as all the things we talk about today.
I mean, is there anything that stops somebody, like legality-wise? Like if I want to go put a license plate reader on my car and just go out and drive around all day, collect that data and sell it? Like, you're out in public, I can see it just by driving by. Mm-hmm. Is it, versus, I've got some data I gave to XYZ company I do business with, and they sold it, and then now all of a sudden, right, this is a huge legal concern, and I'm going to sue you because you sold my data without asking. But I could get that same data by doing the exact same thing, just driving around the streets.
So I'm not sure in terms of legality. There's no federal law because these are all regulated by states or sometimes by counties. And so if you're in Maryland, a lot of states have no regulation. So obviously the companies themselves have reputational risk. So that, I don't know if they're going to sell it to literally anybody. But if you own a tow truck company, you can buy them. So for example, like in Georgia, you can hold your data for X number of days. Other places can hold it for as long as they want. And there are no laws. Sometimes there are no laws in terms of data because people aren't really agitating to discuss this because of our crazy federal versus state versus local system. And so you really have to check in your individual jurisdiction, especially if you go between jurisdictions. So if you go from Washington, D.C. to Maryland to Virginia, all those 3 places have different laws on the books in terms of what data they can hold and what they can't hold.
Of course.
So, also, if you go out into the sticks, they don't have LPR, license plate readers. So that's another issue.
But unfortunately, we can't all go live off the grid. I mean, as much as some of us would really, really, really like to. But it's interesting because that kind of gathering data, right? Essentially, open source intelligence is gathering data that's open, that you don't have to be an agency or any kind of special entity for, right? Mm-hmm. So it's stuff that's public. We'll say in the public domain, it's available. Mm-hmm. But that has gotten we've caught crime bosses that way, and we've if the media is to believe, we've put ordnance on target on right where I suspected militant person happened to take a picture of themselves, left their GPS coordinates on their Twitter page, on their Twitter photo, and we were like, hey, let's send a bomb right there. Thanks for the coordinates.
Yeah, and we have. I mean, noobs are going to get fried.
Makes you start.
By the way, can I just say that if you think America is bad about like data leakage, and I believe it is, an even worse place is Russia, because unlike here in the United States, where we have pretty relatively competent local governments, state governments, and so forth, that actually try to protect your data, they're in Russia. And if you look at a lot of Bellingcat's work over the last several years, there are all these underground data marts where you can buy lots and lots of information on anybody, including, I might add, people who work for the government, like people who are working in a clandestine manner for the Russian government in Russia. So, for example, they did this really interesting expose about Alexei Navalny, who is he's now in jail, but he's one of the foremost anti-Putin.
We'll call him a dissident.
A dissident, yeah, I guess so. He's currently in jail. And what they did is they bought Bellingcat bought on the open market, in the gray market, the flight manifest for all the flights he was on, and then the passengers, and then location data of their cell phones, and a lot of other information, for actually not a lot of money, from what I understand. And based on that, they could tell, even though these were clandestine members of the Russian security forces who were using burner phones and face aliases and so forth, they could tell who was on his plane, who are the guys tracking him, and so he was actually poisoned near Omsk by Putin's men. They could actually tell who was there next to him at that time. And so I don't think the United States, we don't leak data like that, and these are guys who are trying to be hidden in their own country, who are working for the security services. We don't have that. Good. We don't have that kind of granularity or that corruption, for that matter.
Well, I think that seems to be more of a function of the pervasive corruption in some of these places where anybody can be bought off for, because everybody's out to make them. I think a lot of when you look at the countries that are out there, I think and maybe this is too broad of a statement, but the more well off a country is, or we call it the more economically developed and stable it is, mm-hmm. the less likely it is that you'll be able to buy the flight manifest for one of the party leaders. Mm-hmm. Like I'm pretty sure I couldn't go, out and buy or receive or even in a gray market here in the U.S. the flight manifest for some of the Democrats or Republican leadership or. Yeah, I mean, if yes, then we've got I think a bigger problem. But mm-hmm. I think some of that, at least, there's I feel like they're the organizations, even though we're a capitalist society and everybody wants to make a buck, there's limits on like what's reasonable mm-hmm. in terms of data sharing or selling.
I
agree,
so.
Disagree?
So there are highly networked countries out there, smaller countries like Estonia, that I believe have pretty good data privacy controls, and there are places that are all over the place. And I think the United States is kind of in the lower 50% in terms of data privacy, in terms of individual data privacy. I'm not talking about the government. We have the ability to clamp down on certain things, but the amount of information that a regular person, if they understand the tools and they understand the databases, can leverage here in the United States is so much more than, let's say, Canada. So if you wanted to find out where somebody lived here in the United States, it's actually relatively easy, assuming that they're not really trying to hide. In Canada, it's much harder because of they don't have the same system set up. Because I've tried, and now obviously Europe has passed pretty stringent laws, and so they're actually becoming much harder to track individuals down and generate information. But again, this all comes back down to people and incentives. Why do we have much better incentives here in the United States to get all this information? It's because we have credit agencies who repackage our data and sell them to whoever, and you have people who are willing to exploit that. And that's the issue, is that we have to have some sort of much more harsh regulation or comprehensive regulation of how our data is manipulated and used, etc. Otherwise, I mean, the free market's the free market, and so you're going to actually see even more of this information sort of leak out. In Russia, they have the corruption in that country is so pervasive. Let's put it this way: I believe in 2015 or 2016, there was a guy working for the security services who was caught in Holland and trying to break into the World Anti-Doping Agency. They were staying in a hotel and they had sophisticated devices to try to break into the Wi-Fi at WADA. And the Dutch figured it out. As soon as they turned on their devices, the Dutch were there, they broke down the door, and they hauled these guys away. They claimed diplomatic immunity, which they had, and so they were released, but not before the Dutch actually took photos of their passports and so forth. Bellingcat did this really interesting thing. They actually took the guys, they figured out where the guy had his, remember, this is a government official, a government cyber
agent,
employee.
Yeah.
Guy's a car. Where's he register his car? Where do you guys register your car? At your house, right?
DMV. Yeah.
Yeah, your house. You register to your house.
Yeah.
Not in Russia. You register it at your place of business, because you can avoid taxes that way. So it's not your car. It's my company's car. Where does he work? He works for the FSB.
Oh, jeez.
And then he's like, who? By the way, this is all available on a Moscow database. And he said, like, who else registers their car at this one particular address where this guy who is a cyber employee works? And then they found 300 other guys in real name, their true names and their car registration at this one place. So you can know that those guys all work on their hacking division or however they define it.
Nice.
Boom, you just blew literally everybody because of this one corrupt issue within your own domestic system. So that's
boy, am I glad we don't do those kinds of things.
No, not at all. Yeah, we've got it all locked up here in the States.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So that makes that makes it. I mean, these types of I don't want to call them mistakes, but these types of, I mean, it's a combination of people not knowing better, a system that's designed to profit off of your data, right? Mm-hmm. And a little bit of corruption sprinkled happily here and there. It's double-edged because, one, we can find FSB operatives, we can find dumb terrorists, we can find all kinds of evildoers this way, but it works the other way too, right? Where we can target individuals by these people because they're findable too. Like there was a there was a Suits and Spooks thing I was at La Jolla, and they were talking about there's a particular guy that did a particular mission that killed a particular bad guy. And those folks are fairly, I wouldn't use the word anonymous, but photos are, black faces are blacked out. That they keep a pretty tight lid on who they are, where they live for obvious reasons that should be relatively obvious. And he got outed because somebody did a little bit of digging and went to went through some data, pulled it, got his where he lives, who he actually works for. And then he got family information where his kids go to school, and the guy's like, this is supposed to be stuff that's hidden from the outside world. And look, here I am, like, I'm now the target. Like, I don't know, people are gonna, what's gonna happen. And I feel like that is the result of that sword cutting both ways.
Absolutely. I mean, we have, think about it this way. If you left the States 20 years ago, you'd bring your passport and you'd go to wherever you are and do your thing. Now we've got RFIDs in every single one of our passports, and this is a global standard now. You cannot fake RFID information because it goes to a database in that host government held by the Customs and Immigration Organization. And so if you say you're a fake, you say I'm this person, and you aren't, and you're using a fake passport, it is much more difficult to pass through Customs Immigration at a major modern airport than it was 20 years ago because of these tech innovations. Obviously, it's catching a lot of bad guys. A lot of bad guys are doing bad things, and they're using fake passports. But you cannot fake. If you say, "Listen, I came in on the 1st of August and I left on the 30th of August," and the information that they uploaded at the Customs Immigration system does not show that, that's gonna ping in the system, and then you're gonna go into secondary, and then maybe you'll fall apart. There's something wrong, and so I think that it's a good thing. Security is always very good, but you got to. There are also ways that nefarious actors can actually exploit this.
Yeah, fair enough. So as a final point, I guess, what do we want to leave listeners with? Because I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in terms of exposing sort of the availability and the ability for us to find information about others, and in some case ourselves. Bad guys, good guys, and everybody in between. What's the lesson learned here? I mean, you do this information gathering for a living. What's the lesson what do you want to leave people with?
I think this is one way to think about it is your information is really out there in one capacity or another. And so you got to develop a certain level of cyber resilience. Don't go out of your way to give out information to third-party vendors because, as they say, when you don't pay for the product, you are the product. I mean, everybody under the sun has said that.
Amen to that.
But there's going to this is a facet of our 20th century life at this point. I would also argue that a lot of people are still taken advantage of in scams, and like I try to help people who are being attacked or harassed or scammed by people. The FBI through their the FBI is actually doing a lot of work, and they've noticed that we're talking about hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars worth of scams, like business email compromise and romance scams and ransomware, etc. This has become a real facet of life, whether you're an individual, a small company, big company, or city, or the States. And if you're not really taking this seriously, if you're not taking, especially business email compromise, if you're running a business, you're going to get popped if you haven't already been popped already. And so, and people think of cybersecurity as just another thing because you're a cookie manufacturer or you're a sports good, you run like a little restaurant or whatever. People because cyber is just people are going to try to exploit that in a big way, and so you have to take cybersecurity really seriously and keep bad guys out because eventually they're going to come in and take you for everything.
Bad guys and the other bad guys that use you as the product. All right,
yeah.
Aki, thanks for joining us. Been learning quite a bit and burned as we all have been by the overabundant share of information. I appreciate you shining a little bit of a spotlight on it. James, this has been.
I feel burned. I feel burned already.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I feel like I need to go do some deleting. Although a lot of this stuff, I think just you can't. It's out there. You have no ability to go nuke it. It's just out there. You've put it there somebody's put it there about you. So
Well, I here's something. We always talk about misinformation and disinformation. You can put out disinformation about yourself. So if you want to say like, hey, I live in Colorado, but I really live in New Jersey. Just say like I live in Colorado, or I live in St. Louis. I live in Chicago. I live wherever. Eventually, these data scrapers will pick this up, and then suddenly your information becomes less valuable or less specific.
that's interesting.
So you can, if everybody does it, then you can fight the man. By doing
Yeah,
it.
good luck. I think I'm going to set all of my places to be in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. So that's going to be suddenly I'll be other side of the globe entirely. All right, Aki Peritz, thanks for joining us on the show. This has been another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast, guys. Go check out the show notes. Go check out the video that we're posting. You'll get to watch James hiding from the camera right now. He can't hear me, but it's funny. And thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys another time, another place with another great guest on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. We'll see you later.
See you later.
As we fade out on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole episode, we'd like to encourage you to chat with our hosts and guests using the Twitter hashtag #DtSR. Please check out the show notes, catch up on any episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. So on behalf of Rafal, James, for now it's goodbye. We'll see you soon on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast.